Greetings. I'm Braxton Hunter, and you've found Trinity Radio, which is known as, even to atheists, even discussed on other atheist channels as the Christian channel that loves atheists. And along with me today is Dr. Jonathan Pritchett. Are you excited to be on Trinity Radio today, Dr.
I
Pritchett?
am with Rich. I am excited to be on Trinity Radio at 10:30 in the morning instead of 1 o'clock Central Standard Time. So I'm with you, Rich. Let's do this early. Get it over with so I can go back to work.
And I see here, Eric, somebody says, I'm a former Christian. I left my faith back in July. Well, let's see what we can do about that.
Yeah.
Losing my faith was a painful process. I appreciate your kind words. Yeah, and I don't mean to minimize that, but
Yeah,
it's something that we hope will change.
That happens from time to time. But my thoughts on this is you are not dead yet, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Lost faith can be found again. So
Yeah, so
all we do is just want the best for you, and I understand that it can be troubling when you lose your faith and you have to shift your worldview. But, we live lives publicly now because of social media. Everyone's life is public, so we always make big changes in our lives public to people because we think of our Facebook friends and our people on our we think of them as the ones that are friendly to us. We think of them as friends. Like I have noticed that I spend a lot of time talking to people that I have never met in person.
Like Idol Killer.
Yeah.
Who says
And so these kinds of things we now see when people are going through issues like that, when they lose their faith or they're struggling with their faith.
Yeah.
And so I think as a Christian community, we want to rally behind that and say, look, we still love you and we're here to answer questions if you have them. And for those who are more apologetically minded, there's no arguments that we can give to those types of people, right?
And by the way, KL says, how did you lose your faith? I'm perfectly happy, too, for you all to continue having that conversation in the side chat and discussing it amongst yourselves. We're not like those kind of channels that get all upset when people are having a different discussion in the side chat. We get it. Streams like this can be boring on occasion because sometimes we're not doing what we should.
Well, yeah, ours we get boring.
But
as I was saying,
okay.
For those who have heard all the arguments before that, I don't like to engage people on that level when I have a friend that I know knows all the apologetic arguments. I don't like to engage on the level of, well, let's go through all the arguments and tell me what your objections are that you got from some atheist YouTuber that you used to reject and now you believe. They just be a good person, be a friend, tell them you love them, that kind of thing. Tell them if they ever want to talk about like other stuff. Like I am like probably the worst counselor type person I know to help people, but yet people still come to me for reasons that escape me with that kind of thing. So I'm always happy to listen and then tell you how to live your life. But Braxton, what are your thoughts? How do you talk to people who go through those kind of things?
Who are experiencing worldview confusion and possibly have walked away from Christianity?
Yeah.
I appreciate that you're taking it seriously. I hope that people are treating you as a friend and friendly in a friendly way. I hope that there are not just Christians who know like Christian apologetics type stuff and know their Bible, but I hope there are Christians around you who have a lot of wisdom. They've been doing this for a long time, maybe some older Christians to influence you that are good, solid people. But ultimately, we want you to come back because we believe that this is truth, the truth about the nature of reality. We believe there's a lot at stake. And we think this represents the truth about the nature of reality. And I think that I've seen it happen. I've talked on the phone with people even recently who found us through the show who will say that they still experience doubt when they were a non-believer. It's just that then, as I've said on the show many times, then the doubt can be even worse on occasion because if it is all true, you're on the outside of salvation. There.
Yeah,
so,
we've talked about on a previous show where like none of my issues with Christianity, and I have issues with Christianity, and I have doubts and things like that. None of them are ever intellectual. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could argue with myself if I wanted to, both sides, but that's people don't understand that it's not always the arguments that affect people. There's two ways to walk away from the Christian faith. One way is to become convinced that it's false, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's another way that doesn't get talked about a lot, and that is still think that's probably true. It's just not worth it.
Yeah.
Intellectually, it's probably true. Jesus probably did rise from the dead. He probably did die for my sins.
Well,
but he's kind of and maybe not Jesus, but God is kind of a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
That I get that, and I think that or in other words, God is a jerk to me.
Yeah.
And I totally get that.
Yeah.
Because parents are that way to kids sometimes,
Right.
And you have to be sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understand that it's not always the arguments, but sometimes it's the other things that makes the arguments against Christianity more credible because of your mood.
Well, as we are 8 minutes into this, I do think we should probably get to the topic of the day more directly. But I did want to say I'm glad that you found us, Superluminal Sword. This is like the best of both worlds. You've got Chuck Norris there in a fedora as though he were Indiana Jones.
Yeah, he was in a movie, Fire something.
But there is a phenomenon happening right now in the chat, primarily related to Jamie Russell, Christian, Middle Earth, who is gifting people Trinity Radio memberships. I'm not sure how that's...
Hey.
I didn't even know you could do that, but why, thank you for doing that.
Kindness.
And then Miami Cuz says, shout out from the Free State of Florida, the one place where it's very clear that something red certainly happened. And then I had a couple more here, things that Dan Strait was gifted a membership, and there's gifting of memberships happening all over the place. Hey, that's fantastic. All right, let's get into this. I do have a question from Honestly Atheist we'll get to in a little bit. But
Firewalker had to
first,
go to the Internet Movie Database to figure out, wasn't that kind of like an Indiana Jones?
I never heard of it.
Oh.
Never heard of it. I'm going to throw this up here. We'll see what happens. This is not going to be...
To all my ex-Christians out there,
can y'all hear that?
What was the turning point for you?
I tried for a long time to be a progressive.
Right. This is not what we want. All right. Talk about something, Pritchett.
Was Firewalker... I think now I'm on the Chuck Norris and the Indiana Jones thing. I think there was a movie called Firewalker that was kind of like an Indiana Jones knockoff, but I could be mistaken about that. But I have no idea if it's a movie that I've seen or not seen, because I used to watch HBO on Saturdays back when we had cable, and they would always play those 80s movies on repeat. So it could be one of those things that I'm jumbling a bunch of different movies together in my mind. I don't know. But maybe it was a good movie.
I don't know why your screen is the way it is on here, but I'm just going to leave it.
Man, you really...
This looks terrible.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get rid of you. They can still hear you. I'm going to play this question.
To all my ex-Christians out there, what was the turning point for you?
Okay, that's the question. And the reason I'm pinpointing one of these is because... Here he is. Is because this is actually... There is a video that before the end of the day is me responding to a bunch of TikTokers on why they are now ex-evangelical and what tipped the scales. And that's going to be available to patrons by the end of the day if you're a patron at Trinity Radio. And so run on over there to patreon.com/Trinity Radio and become a patron. It'll come out for everybody else at some point, maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday. I don't know. But I didn't want to leave Dr. Pritchett out of the fun because that video is just me reacting to each of these in a very serious way. But I wanted Dr. Pritchett to react to one of the best.
Man,
that the other side
Jamie
has.
Russell's getting all Oprah on there. You get a membership, and you get a membership. I mean, wow, that's pretty interesting.
All right, let's
very,
see.
very nice of you.
Let's see. Here we go with this guy.
And she don't need to be wearing.
Not
To all my
that person.
ex-Christians out there,
Here we
what
go.
was the turning point for you?
This has been a long journey with a lot of turns. I've basically been an atheist for like 10 years. But up until very recently, I was of the opinion that Jesus was probably a great guy, a true historical figure who had a big following because he preached such a nice message. And then Trump happened. Anyone with even the slightest grasp on reality knows that Donald Trump is just an irredeemably terrible person. They also know that Donald Trump lost the election. And yet his followers talk about him like he's the most altruistic, benevolent being who has ever walked the earth. They talk about him returning as president with the same reverence that Christians have talked about the second coming of Christ my entire life. People are literally already praying to Trump. His cult has already gone far beyond what I ever expected a living person could accomplish in their lifetime. Because of that, I'm starting to wonder if Jesus was just a populist loudmouth whose history was rewritten.
All my ex.
Okay, so here we are, Dr. Pritchett. Your thoughts. By the way, if you think I'm just picking like the worst, like the lowest hanging fruit, there's a video that someone made, ostensibly an atheist, in which that question is posed, and a bunch of TikTokers are reacting. And maybe there are a couple that are more like not rigorous, but more substantive, maybe, or maybe you think this is really substantive. I shouldn't color that. Give us your thought. But we're gonna talk.
Well,
about
I
this.
applaud him for at least affirming the historical Jesus. For to have the history rewritten means that there had to.
I thought that's where it was going at first.
Yeah. So I mean, at least he still affirmed the historical Jesus. And while I don't believe that anyone is irredeemable, yes, Trump is kind of not a really good man. But on the other side of that, I mean, as far as like his personal morality goes, but on the other side, he has been generous to people and done acts of kindness. So, you know, he's a mixed bag. I mean, he's a blowhard for sure. But he also has done some nice things to people, you know, people who work for him, gives them $100 bill at the door if they open the door. I mean, he's just done nice things. So, I mean, you know, there's a little bit of humanity there, even if he is a gas bag. As far as Jesus being a populist loudmouth, yes and no. I mean, he could get loud on occasion. If in the most broadest sense of the word, you could say, well,
he appeals to the sensibilities of the common man.
Yes,
in the face of tyranny.
Elitism.
Yeah, elitism.
But at the same time, he was kind of posh. I mean, he did attend a wedding feast and gave the best, finest wine at the conclusion of it, right? I mean,
but at the same time, in Luke, he says, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. The birds of the air have nests, the foxes have holes. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head.
Yeah, but he also, instead of just the elites versus the common man, he also saw the rich young ruler and what? Loved him. So you can't, Jesus. So this is the problem that I think both, and he's right. There is this weird Trump cult where people just think of him as the second Messiah. It's crazy, but there's a tendency for both Christians and non-Christians alike to take religion and try to fit their religion somewhere into their politics instead of taking politics and trying to fit it in their faith, right? Because Jesus ultimately wasn't a populist in any sort of particular political sense of the term. What Jesus was a prophet. Amen. And so he didn't merely speak truth to power, he spoke truth to sinners who needed to go and sin no more, not just those nasty Pharisees, you know, but a woman living with a man who was not her husband when she had 5 previous ones, you know. Jesus kind of rebuked everybody, and also the populist movement wanted Barabbas and not Jesus by the end of it. In John 5 and 6, he keeps having people follow him. They keep wanting food and stuff, but at the end of John 6, they all go away. Wasn't, you know, appealing to the masses.
Too much.
And that's, yeah. So to try to pigeonhole Jesus in religious in political terms always fails. So you want to go into the reverse. I don't take the position that Jesus was never political, you know, but I don't overstate his involvement in politics. But I don't take the position that he was just a firebrand political activist either. That none of that works. It works within the rubric of Jewish prophet and Messiah and king and all of that, and in the way that he transformed those offices. So that's, that's where I put it. And even the Jesus seminar type people
Mm-hmm.
who would cut out,
They
like
assigned beads.
Well, they
colored.
assigned B's, but essentially wanting to
Oh yeah,
cut out
Jesus
like
didn't
Thomas
really say
Jefferson, all the
this.
things
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
still did. They would still see Jesus, as an eschatological prophet type within that matrix, not really within our categories. So to me, it's anachronistic. I mean, populism is what, a 19th century type idea.
Uh-huh.
So. Yeah, that's what I think about that.
So there's some interesting other questions in there, and you'll check that video. It'll come out at some point publicly, but let's go to your questions now and a couple of things that we want to point to. First of all, I just wanted to say this benevolent person who is going around giving stuff to everyone like he's
a populist trying to curry favor from Trinity radio fans.
Or like November Claus over here.
Yeah.
But thank you, November Man. That's what we're going to call him, Jamie Russell now, November Man. And he celebrates 26 months as a channel member, and there are others of you out there like that. That to me is like, that's 2 years. That's over 2 years. That's fantastic. We are so grateful for your benevolence, November Man, November Claus.
November Claus.
Okay, there were some questions here. He's still doling it out like it's candy, but here,
very, very kind of you.
Here's honestly atheist who we can always count on for a good question. Says, do you guys have any strong opinions on the growing popularity of role-playing games like D&D, potential spiritual danger, or just
a bunch of nerds? Why do they got to be nerds?
I don't know why that's a.
Why not geeks? Geeks is the acceptable way of
geeks is the term. Yeah, a nerd is someone who legitimately knows a particular thing and knows all the facts and detail. Like in the STEM fields, you'll have a lot of nerds, right?
Yeah.
But when it's a passion, a driving passion in you for some franchise, let's say, or something, that's geekdom, and people need to understand the difference.
What were your thoughts on the TikTok? Or are you just wanting my thoughts and your thoughts come in your video later? Because you kind of let me go on there, and I don't know if I said something that you you agree with, disagree with.
Yeah, no,
they like it when we fight.
Well, I don't think that there's a fight there really to be had. I think we're relatively in agreement. I think that, he said, what I would say about it is more toward the apologetics. Obviously, in terms of the character of Jesus as presented by the stories, this is not a man who is like Trump in the sense of his words that he says or things that he tweets, because he didn't tweet. But if he had, he might not have tweeted those things. He would have tweeted things that would have gotten him kicked off the platform. He would have gotten kicked off the platform, I think.
Yes.
But all that said, I think there are obvious important differences. He would have a very different morality, I think, for his personal life, obviously. And I think that there would be a lot of different things. But what I would really want to push to is the apologetic side of this, the evidential side of this, and say what the man said on the TikTok video was, he said that I think that, this made me think that maybe Jesus' history was rewritten, he says, and he was actually more of a populist and blah, 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 blah. Well, as you pointed out, populist is fine if you're not using that as a demonized word and if we can point to some important things, right?
Yeah.
But that are positive about his ministry. But first of all, the argument number one sounds to me like, here's a thing that crossed my head that maybe could have happened. So I guess I'm not a Christian anymore. And I guess I'm sure it wasn't that basic for him, but this is what he gives us. What was the turning point for you? When I saw that happen with Trump, and I thought maybe that could have happened with Jesus. Well, okay. The second thing is, we actually know now that the important features about Jesus' life and death and resurrection, the important details that Christians use to make that case, and certainly the belief goes back very, very early. Scholars put it even as early as 3 years after the events of the resurrection, supposed resurrection. Plus, you take what they grant, and you get that Jesus thought of himself as God's special agent to bring about the kingdom on earth. You get that he died by Roman crucifixion under Cornelius Tacitus. People had experiences after the fact, his closest disciples, that at least they interpreted to be appearances of the risen Christ. And even if you want to take this view that some of the YouTube atheists are pushing, all we really have is just Paul. Okay, well, Paul had an experience that he at least believed, and then part of the thing you're gonna have with other experiences is you're gonna have to explain the rapid expansion of the early church and the willingness to be persecuted.
Yeah. Now, I mean,
So I don't think the story was a fishtail like it was changed. We know that it wasn't, because we know that at least the claims, whether you believe the claims or not, go back to almost the events themselves. So it wasn't a rewritten history. Now, in a sense, it was a rewritten history in that it was written down later and compiled from perhaps some other things that have been written and certainly things that were said.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you want to go with that kind of thinking, loudmouth, anachronistically used populism, you can find that in Second Temple literature. If it was rewritten, we would know. We could go look at, the teacher of righteousness and that cult and the Essenes, communities, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But you can go into Second Temple literature and find all kinds of, quote, populistic, loudmouth stuff. So we know that if they were actually to rewrite it, if they were to rewrite Jesus, they would move away from what we have.
Right.
Given the temperature of
Second
Temple Judaism, Christianity in the first century, they would have rewrote it the other way instead of trying to doll it up to be more palatable. No, the gospel accounts made it less palatable in that situation. Hence, he died, right? And they still told that story. So if you want a rewritten Jesus, we know what that would look like. We can look at other extant texts in that time period and see if they wanted to fix.
If they wanted
Gospels.
to do that, how would they have done it? And they would have done it this way.
Right, exactly.
Okay, on it. So on this question, though, from Honestly Atheist,
I love this question.
Back to this. I don't. Okay, so cautiously, I don't have a problem with this because it's. I think of this now. I wasn't allowed to do it when I was a kid, or at least I think I wasn't allowed to do it. I think maybe I took that for granted, but I wasn't allowed to watch He-Man. And so, and that's not, people could laugh at that, but look, the reality is, I think people who believe that the spiritual is real and they think that there's messaging in TV and cartoons, which there obviously is, they want to be like cautious about that. And I don't think that's crazy. But with Dungeons and Dragons, among mature players who understand that this is meant merely as a fictional game, and to the extent that it talks about some real things, you're aware of that.
This has always been my question.
But it's an issue of personal conviction, I think, is what I want to say about it. I think it's an issue of personal conviction. I would play it right now. I've never played it, but I kind of want to learn a little bit how to play at least one of those type of games.
Yeah, tabletop role-playing is actually fun. But my question for Christians on these kind of subjects is, where do you draw that line? Okay, you have sorcery and all of that stuff, in Lord of the Rings. And so where do you draw that line that's like, it's okay if it's Tolkien, but it's not okay if it's put out by somebody? No, it's all just wizards and dragons and various elves and, all of that stuff, fantasy creatures and all of that. So I don't know where you draw that line. Now, I never played D&D. I was Weston Games put out the Star Wars role-playing game in their D6 system, which I am a huge fan of. I never played the D20 when Wizards of the Coast put out their Star Wars, and I think a different company now. So I'm all for tabletop role-playing games. I mean, you want to talk about burning 8 hours with friends where you're not sitting there
that's what
all
I want.
staring
I want
at,
that experience.
where it's imaginative instead of the screens that your all shared video game experience is providing for you.
Don't talk about that. You don't understand that. But go ahead with the other thing that you do understand.
No, I understand what it is in principle, is everyone's staring at a screens with joy, whereas
you're staring at a piece of cardboard.
No, I mean, in fact, we didn't have miniatures or anything like that for the Star Wars games, and a lot of people do D&D. I mean, like the Warhammer crowd, they'll spend what I think is a fortune on their miniatures and stuff. And I never got into that because just the sitting around the table with good friends, going for hours in an imaginative world,
that's what it's about.
Is great
I guess.
for creativity and creating culture instead of having it all provided for you in an overpriced box while you hold joysticks and
Trinity
once
Radio.
again in separate houses with headsets on instead of gathered around the table.
Trinity Radio, would Jesus have paid for our blue checks? My opinion is that he would not have had a blue check for himself unless someone just gave it to him, and he would probably be indifferent. And I don't think he would pay for blue checks for somebody else. But I could be wrong. I'm not Jesus, and I can't speak ex cathedra.
Yeah.
But that's my take.
Jesus would say, get off Twitter
He'd be like,
and
"What are you
go get
talking
some dice and some pencils and some paper. and
No,
draw
yeah,
up
yeah. Do not say that. Jesus, we don't know that Jesus would endorse or even be allowable for. He'd be like, why are you wasting time? He said, you just said it. 8 hours of your life with a bunch of men staring at a piece of cardboard? He said, don't you know about my kingdom? Go out and serve my kingdom. That's what he would say. So you have to invite unbelievers to your D&D parties, and then it becomes an evangelistic event.
I'm saying if it was between Twitter and tabletop role-playing games, Jesus would choose the latter.
Oh, I see. Okay, here's an interesting thing. Eric says, I also lost my faith because of the Greek word pistis, which is the word for faith. It is translated as faith. I said in a debate it's belief because of evidence, and the moderator, Dapper Dino, called me out on that, saying that's not true. Well, let's consult. I would encourage you to consult Greek experts or Greek resources to find out what the word means instead of some
Michael
random
Jones
moderator,
has a whole thing
some
on
random
this.
moderator in some debate somewhere.
Right.
The word pistis obviously does, in cases, refer to a confidence you have on the basis of evidence.
Right.
The confidence that you have in the Hebrews Hall of Faith, for example, it lists off a bunch of people who had incredible supernatural things happen. Now, don't make the mistake that a lot of people make of saying, well, yeah, but I don't believe all those supernatural things happen. It doesn't matter. We're trying to figure out how the person who used this word used it at the time.
Yeah.
And we know that they are using it with respect to people who had that faith, that confidence, on the basis of, if the story is true, literally seeing, experiencing, hearing things.
Yeah,
that
that's
were real.
that's the key. I don't just say, well, faith is based on evidence, but I will say that faith is a believing allegiance or loyalty that is based in what we could say is the evidence of past performance, with the future expectation of more performance. So that's how. I mean, it's on the basis of past performance, not blind. And it also that ongoing allegiance is also with the expectation of a future performance that's going to be in line with the past performance, right? So because God has done all of this, and this, we can expect this, and because of what He's doing right now for you, you can expect that to ongo. So it's a believing allegiance based on the evidence of past performance with future expectations.
Yeah, and I was actually looking for something that I had where,
but it's of grace. So remember, it's reciprocal. It's the grace and the grace response of gratitude that your patron continues to provide, and as a client you continue to promote the loyalty and honor, even when it doesn't seem like it's going your way.
Yeah, it's these words originally meant something to the culture they're in, and so when somebody starts using a word, you go, wait a minute, that comes from a different culture. Let's figure out how the people in that culture used it. I actually was looking for. There's a pretty easy to find statement that comes from the 1st century or maybe the beginning of the 2nd century. That is a Greek text where somebody is using the word pistis all over the place, and they are talking about like you have pistis in the captain, that he's going to be able to sail the ship because he's sailed a lot of ships before, and different kinds of occupations like that. And it's like, there you go. You're having your confidence because of this evidence. So yeah. All right. That should not have been part of why you became a rejected Christianity.
Yeah, you were on the right track with what you said, more so than the uninformed.
And it's telling that you didn't point to like a theological encyclopedia or something or dictionary. You pointed to a debate moderator, and so debate moderators aren't
Channel Angel.
Inherent.
Thank you so much. What the heck? Time change is hard enough to do. Amen on that.
It's interesting that we haven't got any further than that, but yes, it's true to say that we did start earlier today, and that's because I'm going to have to do a lot of things today that aren't going to allow me to be here. One of those things is just a regular doctor's appointment.
Do we have those? Do a community post for our subscribers poll. Do you like starting earlier on Friday like Jonathan does?
Oh yeah, there is a way to do that.
Yeah, because I actually like this because it means I can get on with my day when this is all over.
Do you talk?
Do you prefer? Well, I mean, we have about 41 people, which is par for the course. But I'm wondering if we started this on a regular basis, if it might not attract more viewers of the live stream instead of the 1,000+ people that watch it later. So I actually like this, but I guess y'all have the final say.
There you go. Y'all can tell us. We've never done one of these on a live stream.
Yeah.
Other people do it all over the place.
I mean, I
Look at
guess it
this.
makes sense first to ask the people who are here, but then to later put it into the community thing.
No, they like it later. Some of them. Somebody said they like it later.
Yeah. Well, I don't. Someone made a statement about, I used to think intelligent design was, you just scrolled up. And
I
missed
did.
it. Yeah. Super luminal sword. The Chuck Norris guy. I used to think intelligent design was compelling, but I've since come to change my mind. I have not changed my mind on intelligent design at all. I think the more data that comes out, the more compelling it is.
Yeah, it's got the immediate compelling reaction that even Sean Carroll admitted when he was on Joe Rogan, that no, it's a very reasonable inference that if you wake up in the world without knowing anything else and start looking around, you think somebody made all this. Right. So it's an immediate intuition.
Yeah.
Probably one of the reasons that every society ever has had some sort of belief in something like this. And then on top of that, not only is it immediately obvious, and I did talk over you, I'm going to give it back to you, but then when you dig underneath and you're like, well, maybe it's not as complicated as it seems like it is. Maybe this would come around easier than we thought. And then you dig under and you're like, oh, wow. Okay. There's like 5,000 encyclopedias worth of information in like this one little thing right here, and there's like trillions of those, and I don't know what you do. It did not get easier to explain as we dug underneath.
Yeah,
right?
But I do think when I listen to people more informed about intelligent design than I am, even like Michael Jones and all that, and he affirms the theistic evolution thing, but still, sees God behind it all and whatever. When I listen to people who are more knowledgeable about this subject than I am, I find it very, very compelling, and yet compelling is what I similar sentiment. I don't find it interesting. It's like, to me, that's one of those. I mean, yeah, it seems like you said it's intuitively obvious, and then the more you talk about it, the more compelling I find it. But I just don't find that whole field of like scientific apologetics to be all that interesting. Right. So
well, now here, let's go back to the
topic.
I
don't wade into that. Like when I listen to Luke Barnes talk, it's, man, that's he sells it better than other people for me as far as getting my interest.
You must have
level.
Recently heard or read something because you brought it up 3 shows in a row about that. And so I'm glad you like Luke Barnes.
Well, I'm saying he sells me on
teleology.
Getting interested. No, not sells me on the argument. He sells me on being interested because he's interesting.
Yeah.
He sells me on paying more attention to this stuff than others do because it's the accent, I think. But that goes a long way. But I don't normally find those scientific stuff all that interesting.
So the Trump comparison is not, this must be what happened, but it is a defeater for anyone staunchly claiming the truth of the gospel accounts is the only way to explain our observations. See, I don't think so, honestly, atheist. Well, I mean, there are other ways to explain the data about, it depends on what you're talking about. Are you talking about in general? Because, I think the resurrection is the reason that it took off the way that it did. If you think it just took off because it was a really good story and people bought into it, that would be, maybe that's what you're saying. But I don't... must be what happened, but I don't see it as a defeater because I don't think it handles the facts. I mean, you can have a lot of different things that explain the facts. What you want to do then is an inference to the very best explanation, right? Yeah. Which one's the best? And so, like we've said, if I walk in here tomorrow and I see that what looks like Pritchett's glasses are sitting on the table where he was sitting today, my first thought is, I bet Pritchett left his glasses here because that explanation is a lot better than, I bet Bigfoot broke into here, even though I think that if he did exist, he would probably live in the Pacific Northwest. But somehow he got here by train or something, got in and put the glasses there. That is an explanation, but it's like a terrible explanation, especially compared with Pritchett put his glasses there.
Yeah, it's not a defeater. If
it doesn't even attempt to account for the evidence from the resurrection that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's like because you're saying that any alternative theory that you can dream up about what really happened other than the actual accounts that we have from history about what happened, those aren't defeaters.
Because we're not making a logical argument like that. We're not
Yeah.
saying, premise one, premise two, therefore. I mean, you could frame it that way, but this is more of a inference to the best explanation.
Yeah.
We're looking at the evidence and we're trying to. So it's not like a defeater is just another what you're calling a defeater and would be a defeater. Like, okay, take something like the argument from evil, like the logical argument from evil. It cannot be. Let's say the claim is, as it would be, in however it's framed up, it cannot be the case that a God who is all loving, all powerful, and all knowing would allow for this evil. There isn't an explanation. Okay, well, all I have to do is give you one that could be true, that would explain it, and now we've got a defeater. But if we're just saying, okay, which of the available, we don't really know what of the available options make sense of this data the best. Well, the one that makes the best sense of the data, I think, is the resurrection, and something else has to come forward. And the Trump thing doesn't, for a couple of reasons. One, it doesn't even attempt to account for the pieces that we give for why the resurrection is true. But then secondly, you would have to have Trump gain the level of influence that he had, that Jesus had, or has come to have, I guess, or had within the first century, or however you want to frame that up. You have to have him get there without Twitter, without the internet, without this big of an audience, just talking to people and getting 12 disciples. I don't think you get something like that.
You are missing so many good comments in here. They're not questions. I know we're here to answer questions, but Rich O'Cat's talking about D&D games with redemption arcs. Mr. Green's talking about D&D GURPS. Kevin's talking about Warhammer. I mean, it seems like we touched
really a nerve with three of these guys.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And see, yeah, he got it. He knows what I'm talking about. It's like he needs a break from the screen. So, I think those Warhammer miniatures are cool. So I think the Warhammer 3K. Oh, they're like these little what do you call them? Mech.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Looking things that you have to paint them.
But I agree with you that three people in our comments want to talk about that. Yes.
Well, they're in the know. They're in the ring, right?
Pastor Mark says, if someone wants to abandon belief due to speculative what-if ponderings, I think there's actually something else going on.
I do too.
Mm-hmm.
I'll yeah, and that's not like psychologizing. That's just experience talking. When you've seen this before, it's like, Idol Killer's comment, pistis means faith, faithfulness for reasons. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they can be reasonable reasons. Yeah, but I mean, I guess when it is only three people in comparison to like the bulk of the feed, that nerds was probably right from honestly atheists instead of geeks, because they're like, even like people who are pop culture geeks are like, yeah, those role-playing game people are the nerds. But I do not think, and there is something, to use a word that's a Christian word, incarnational, about the tabletop role-playing games that you do not get in the Gnostic video game RPGs that people like you play. Okay.
I don't play any RPGs.
Anything that has a way to level up your person that you're playing is an idea stolen from tabletop role-playing games.
Well,
and you do play games where you level up your player.
So there is this other mention here. I think that honestly, I think the shift to realizing there are other possibilities is what caused some to suddenly doubt. Yeah, because on the video, the full video that will be released later, there is a person who basically says, I became aware of the fact that there are all these other religions, and I never really thought about that. And once I became aware of it, I just kind of stopped being a Christian, because I realized I was just trusting based on faith. And of course, that's with the definition of faith that we're decrying. It's more like something like blind faith is what she means to convey. And so then it's just, well, the awareness that there are other religions is not an attack on, an undermining of, or an objection to Christianity, just stated like that. You have to add some, make an argument out of it. But I don't know. There are other religions, so I shouldn't be a Christian. Maybe there are other religions, and so I should think more deeply about why I'm a Christian. And maybe it'll end up that she won't be a Christian in the end. But just finding out there are other religions, and then I'm not a Christian anymore. I don't know.
Eric had another great question.
Well, real quick to cap off, Honestly Atheist, he said, "I'm sorry if my language offended anyone, but I admit I used the language because I thought Pritchett would appreciate it."
I do appreciate it.
I didn't notice your
Don't
language.
think that I didn't appreciate it. Don't think that it wasn't appreciated. No, absolutely, yeah. They're nerds. But
I want to know their source on Pistis, a reliable source on Pistis. Here, do this. Just literally just go on the internet and type in the word pistis space definition. Look for responses made by people who know Greek, like Christians, and there it all is. I think I actually read the piece I'm talking about from in my debate with Matt Dillahunty on stage. Somebody asked.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a quick version, or I mean, I think Salvation by Allegiance Alone, that book will give you the references to the ancient sources on all of that as well. If you're looking for like the usage in Greco-Roman literature, but your other question that Braxton's not putting it up there, but this question that I think is interesting is this question for Trinity, question for you. From my understanding, the Bible says we cannot speak to the dead. What if it's a dead loved one we miss so dearly and it hurts us to never speak to them again? Okay, I mean, if you're talking about conjuring the dead type thing, witchcraft, that's, the Bible forbids that. And I think part of the reason why is I believe in what we often refer to as the supernatural worldview. And I think you're messing with things that if you wanted to use a Ouija board or something to try to communicate with a dead loved one, what you're going to, I'm not saying you're not going to get anything on the other end. I'm saying what you're going to get on the other end is definitely not going to be your loved one. And I think that whatever deception, which is Satan and his kingdom, is about a kingdom of deception. And so I think what you're running into there is playing with the kind of fire that you don't want to mess with and that God doesn't want you to mess with. That said, Samuel seemed to be summoned from the grave in the Old Testament, but that's a little bit different than communing with dead spirits. But also that the way you said that, speak to the dead, the Bible forbids speaking with the dead. Okay, because, and again,
if there's a thought that you have that it would feel good to express,
yes,
as though it were, I wish I'd said this to my father, I'm going to say it out loud. You know, I don't know. There's the idea is when you're actually trying to get some sort of communication going.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing, because I speak to my dead loved ones all the time. I have no problem. Everyone knows that has followed this channel for any number of years that I had lost my dad back in 2009, and I still speak to him. Right? Dad, if you're listening, Dad, if you're out there, things like that, those kind of colloquialistic phrases, I don't feel guilty over that. I don't expect to have a conversation with my dad. And if that ever happened, I think that I would be really, really freaked out, because in my mind I'd be thinking, I'm not talking to my dad, I'm talking to a demon. But what I know is I don't have to go forever thinking I will never speak to my dad again, because the hope in Jesus Christ also comes with it the hope of resurrection. And in that hope, I will not only rise from the dead to exist for all eternity in the new heavens and new earth, but I will be with my dad. And in so much as he wants to have conversations with me from time to time, we will have those conversations. But I expect in the new heavens and new earth, while everyone's trying to get good real estate in Jerusalem, I'm going to be somewhere in Mountain View, Arkansas on the White River. And my dad will probably come visit from time to time. We'll go trout fishing and see if the trout resurrect from the dead after we eat them.
All right, let's look at the poll now. Do you prefer early streams? 57% of who are here now. But yeah, we're doing an early stream, so we would expect that would
right. And they, yes.
But you like it
Yes.
that way.
And guess what? The 43%, you're still here anyway. So, I mean, you are here, and the bulk of the audience wants to go with that. So, I think we're learning something here with this early stream. We have a Tim the Ain't, my favorite Twitter person, along with Derek Beeler.
Read that.
I play D&D, and I would say tabletop games are healthier and build more character. Amen. Tabletop role-playing games are why I still have friends after college.
TTRPG.
Tabletop role-playing
Alphabet
games.
Man.
Yeah.
Or what?
And I actually, because video games, even multiplayer video games, whether they're RPGs or not, they take all the creativity and force feed it to you where you're a product, whereas you get a template and a set of rules, but the GM or DM and the player characters at a tabletop, you create the world. It is a co-creative process that within a certain realms you can go within the rule book, you can kind of tweak those as well. It's just more creative, and it's more community, I think, than these. So yeah, it builds more character, especially if you have great story arcs. If you're great, not just the DM, but the players as well. If you can all together, with the luck of the rolls, tell a great story. It's the same thing as with literature can build character, right? We don't talk a lot about that except for the imaginative apologist types, but yes, that kind of creativity in storytelling with a really solid narrative and a a kind of a structured. I've been to those games where there's no structure and they're just there's no prep in it and they're just making it up as they go, and those aren't great. But when you have a really good GM and a really good set of players who take it seriously, yes, it builds character and it builds way more community and way more creative than any video game that's trying to. Like I said, it's the difference between incarnation and Gnosticism. That's the difference.
All right. So yeah, that's a really good question here. I'm not gonna. Yeah, here's the thing. 20 July 1944 says, "What meaning of pistis would turn you back to Christ?" Like that's a really good question. Like it seems like what this person is saying is that there was a cumulative effect, and so I don't want to be unfair with this, but if you found out that pistis, you said this is one of the reasons you walked away. If you found out, as we know to be true, and it isn't this, you can demonstrate this for yourself just with a simple search. If you came to find out that pistis could mean a confidence on the basis of evidence, maybe sometimes it doesn't mean that, but you found that is often what it means. Would that be a big move for you? Like, would that help resolve a lot of this? I'm not sure how, but if it would, then this is great news. When we said at the beginning, we'll see what we can do about that. Maybe we did. Okay.
Aaron Raw made an entire video.
Most of the confusion about pistis that currently exists is thanks to Aaron Raw.
Raw. Poor researcher and loudmouth rhetorician, Fat Glenn Denzig, made a video rebutting IP, and without watching it.
Well, no, I did watch it, and the fact is, he then discussed it with your favorite apologist, Eric Hernandez.
Yeah,
or he discussed pistis. And Eric pressed him on, do you have an academic source that defines it the way you do? From my memory, what he came up with was Dan Barker. And Dan Barker is a ex-preacher, but you don't refer to him as you wouldn't think of Dan Barker as an academic source on this or anything. So if that's what you're basing this on, just do your own research. Just Google around with it. It's not hard. I mean, I told you, here's a great place to go. Here's a great place that has that quote that I'm talking about from the first century with references. Go on YouTube and search for Jonathan McClatchy and the 1 Minute Apologist. When Jonathan McClatchy, my friend, was on with the 1 Minute Apologist, they have a video that's only a minute and a half long or whatever. And it is Jonathan McLatchy reading that statement out from the first century, and you'll see it, you'll hear it with your own eyes. And if you don't believe after that, it won't be because the evidence doesn't convince you. It will just be because you don't want to accept it because it's right there.
Why
So
is
I hope you
honestly
accept that.
atheist shocked that I have familiarity with tabletop role-playing games? Of course I do. I played them. What Pastor Mark asked, obviously tabletop role-playing games are superior to video games, but where would you put MMO, multi-something online role-playing game? What are those called?
MMORPG,
Yeah.
massive multiplayer,
Massive
role-playing.
multi-online.
I just play PUBG.
I,
Can't even level up.
those see that goes back to the sad, lonely Braxton Hunter with a headset, in his bedroom with the computer flapped open, and I don't know. That's just it. Again, that's removing the creativity from the player and turning the player into more of the product instead of the imaginative source of all the adventure. And so I just think that these screens are robbing you of creativity and life and community and giving it this fake substitute. It's awful.
Mm-hmm.
There was like I want to say it was like a Star Trek massive multi, and I was like, who can do this? This is stupid. But I mean, people, if you like it, if it's your thing, go for it, have fun. But you are missing out on the joys of tabletop multiplayer. Anyway, New Testament. Nick is here, and he says about pistis. I can't read it because Braxton has a screen up. The idea that pistis means belief without evidence is so absurd. Yes. I agree. It doesn't matter who says it, though.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to believe what 100% of the evidence says what pistis meant in the ancient Mediterranean world, then you're not going to believe it because you don't want to. Because Aaron Raw and Dan Barker seem to know better. But I don't see a whole lot of people out there trying to, in the critical community, of those against Christianity, trying to say, no, that's not right. I don't know of any critical scholars out there saying, no, that's...
Yeah, so if you just go, like you can go to anywhere. You could go to Study Light, like you like to go to. You could go to BibleStudyTools.com. Let's go to BibleStudyTools.com. Pistis, meaning in the Bible. Pistis, relating to God, relating to Christ, all religious beliefs. Belief with the predominant idea of trust or confidence. So we go to the definition and we get conviction of the truth of anything. Belief in the New Testament of a conviction or belief respecting man's relationship to God and divine things. Generally with the included idea of trust and a holy fervor born of faith joined with it. The conviction that God exists and is the creator and ruler of the things, the provider and bestower. A strong, welcome conviction or belief that Jesus is the Messiah, through whom we may obtain salvation. And as we say, this is a strong conviction, and it's a trust based on that. We're not saying that it's... So here's the way you think about it. It's trusting that God will do for us in the future what he said he would do on the basis of what we can see he's done in the past.
And by the way...
And that's how it's used even in Hebrews, the passage.
That's how it's used in English. The idea that Aaron Ross said, belief without evidence. Sorry, I have faith in my wife, and it's not based on no evidence.
Right.
I have faith. Nobody says that faith is belief on it. Nobody even uses that in common parlance.
I have faith you won't have done anything to make me fire you by this time next week.
Yeah.
Not that I won't fire you, that you won't do something that would warrant me firing you. I have faith in that based on a track record.
Right. I have faith that someone's
Maybe you
going
don't
to
have
complain
faith
about...
in that, but
Yeah, I have faith that someone in the comments is going to complain about my uneven volume levels. Right?
I've tried harder today with that.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, nobody even uses that now. And if you've thought about it for a second, it's just a piece of useless, empty rhetoric that faith is belief without evidence. No, I have faith in this chair to hold me up based on the fact that it has held me up for years, and it's probably having an easier time now than it did 3 years ago. And I have faith that it'll continue to do so. Could that faith fail? Maybe, but I doubt it. That's why I keep going.
Well, and with that, we're just going to have to go ahead and end this, because even though I know that we're all having a good time and the questions are still flowing in even now, every good thing must come to an end, except for eternity with Jesus. And if you're an unbeliever, we hope that you will trust Jesus. If you say that you used to be a Christian or something like that, we want you to come back. Well, how do you do that? Well, repent of your sins, turn from your life without Jesus to a life with Jesus. And if you do that, reach out to us at braxton@trinityradio.org. Love to talk to you about that. And
we also, before we go, we want to give a shout out to Tim the Ancient for his other super chat. He says, I play D&D and would say tabletop games are healthier and build more character than video games. Oh, yeah. I think we already did that. I don't know if you put that up
someone
there or not.
says they're wanting to discuss the resurrection in the comments section. If Braxton leaves it open, of course it'll be open. I've never closed off the comment section, as far as I know, for anything. And Jamie Russell leaves us with these wise, wise, wise words that you should all take to heart, and do not laugh at them. If you drive a car, you already operate with much faith.
Amen.
And with that, we'll see you next time on Trinity Radio. Eric says, I got the argument of pistis from IP, and I felt like I was lied to from him when I was corrected by Dapper Dino and the Greek Scholar. You weren't lied to. IP was right